Well, hello and welcome to Agenda 21 Radio. This is the radio show that is stopping totalitarianism one exceptional American at a time. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, are you that exceptional American? Well, I suspect you are. That's why you're listening to this radio show right here, right now on Agenda 21 Radio. Remember to visit our website, a21r.com, and of course, New California State. New California State, say the future. And with us right now for a second time today is Simone Anderson, and we've been talking to her, and we just had John Mills on, got the intel from him. Today you're going to get some more from Simone because I know she's got more. So we're just invited her back. And Simone, welcome back. And I'm sure you took a little nap and you're fine and comfortable. And now here you are. Okay, so John is kind of iffy on what's going to happen at the Capitol. I think he's concerned. He's expressed concern about drones. And he agrees with everybody else that I talk to that we are in an absolute war going on right now. And it's a hot, kinetic war. Oh, let's get you turned. There you go.
Body language of Gavin Newsom and the mayor. They're like giggly when they're saying they're smiling, they're laughing, they're rocking. It's very unusual because I think they're happy about it. It's a very strange situation. Have you seen any of their body language on their interviews?
It's unbelievable. Yeah, we played the body language of Newsom in this business. And yeah, that is one thing that as a personality test that they've all been failing. They are happy about it. And it kind of, in fact, with Bass, who's a known communist, by the way, absolutely been known for a long, long time. Trevor Loudon has been on our show, I don't know how many times. Trevor Loudon was the first national figure to come out and endorse New California State, I might add, about 6 years ago. And he said then about Karen Bass and about all the communists, because he had written his book, The Enemies Within, which I still have sitting in my stack of books right here on the side of my desk. But he said very clearly that she was a communist. But her body language when that guy, the British guy, was questioning her at the airport when she was leaving to come back to Los Angeles, it was very, very odd. She wasn't answering. Of course, I understand the defensiveness there, but she wasn't going to say a word and spoil the fun, I don't think, because you've seen other things where she's kind of like you're saying, she's happy.
Well, she's talking about dead people and she's smiling. I mean, it's very strange. What I've come to understand, remember last time, I think at the end of the year, we did a show about the fall of Hollywood. And I literally did the Hollywood up in flames. That was a week before it actually went up in flames. And what we understand is that Hollywood is part of the military industrial complex. And this has been proven repeatedly since the 70s that a lot of the people are on the payroll are openly CIA officers or people being paid by the CIA. And I believe, because I was telling you, like the SEC, the SEC was giving them money. The health department was giving them money. The military, the Pentagon was giving them money. Why are they funding ABC, NBC, and CBS with basically anti-American sentiment? And you're seeing all of these movie stars like Clooney, and what you have to, my conversation with you sparked me to even investigate more. And basically, all of these big stars have their own production companies, and they've been getting like a $50 and $100 million deals pumped into their companies. And what I'm looking at and what I'm realizing is that, they're being paid off to be the mouthpieces. But the other thing is that I think the TV and the mainstream media collapsed quite a while ago. And that's why shows like Jimmy Kimmel and all of the things that used to be comedy shows, they're all political now because they're getting paid through this government funding. So that's why they've all turned. And a lot of these companies that gave, like people like Julia Roberts and Meghan Markle and all these people who got like $100 million deals, and they're not performing in any way, and they just are getting all their contracts canceled by the studios. I think there's much more to this story. And if you understand DEI, you have to go directly to Larry Fink, the head of BlackRock, one of the co-founders. And basically, they knew that America wasn't accepting all of this stuff. So if you get a movie financed, you have to put these quotas in. That's why all these major companies that never even took political stances, it's tied to their financing for expansion, for refinance.
Gotcha.
So this is what's really going on there, right?
So the DEI is a financial. You want our money. DEI is the answer. We're going to give you. You have to have so much production about and that fits when you think about all these programs that you get to watch, and all of a sudden DEI jumps in. They're like, wait a minute, it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it does. And even scripting, it gets right down into the scripting, doesn't it? And what shows you're portraying and that sort of thing.
Well, it's funding the communist takeover of the United States. That's what it's doing by using the media, infiltrating, using the Hollywood. But as you can see, the Hollywood stars lost a lot of their power over the last, say, just even month. So I think it's kind of backfiring on them. But I'm very concerned about what's going on in Los Angeles. A lot of people are kind of having this attitude, oh, well, the Californians voted for this. They're getting what they deserve. And believe me, I know a lot of people who live in the Palisades. They are engineers, they're architects, they're just other people. There's a lot of people that probably voted Republican, but their vote, again, has never been counted in California.
Let's dispel this. Everybody listening around in the nation is that we don't have control over the election system. And that's the problem. We don't run the election. The cartels run the election system. And they're selecting people. They groom people year in and year out to take certain offices and things like that. When you start looking at the data, go back to 2000 and look how elections were run then before the electronics really caught up in 2006. And all of a sudden you see major changes. And California has been a one-party system since 1996. And so it shouldn't be a surprise if they are controlling the outcome of the elections. We, John Q. Public, can't have any say. That's why I say I've manually gone around and spoke in every county of California. And this is a deep red state, period. End of subject. The Democrats don't even show up. I mean, they don't show up to anything unless it's paid protesters. So when you have it that bad, there's manipulation going on. Don't tell us, oh, you should vote for more Democrats. Get out there and vote more. Wait a minute. No, it's time out. We can't vote more because, they can switch around the computers and vote a hell of a lot more. As we saw in this last election, as 5 or 6 seats were given up to the Democrats in the later days of the election. 27 days to count the votes after the election. 27 days. And look what happens. Yeah, we lost 5 seats right in Orange County, but there's more. We could have gained 20 seats on the Republican side in a fair fight, but it actually could have been a hell of a lot more than that in a fair fight if this thing was done by one-day voting. Because they don't want that, though. That's the whole point. The system is rigged against us. We don't have a say, and this is what we get. We get common John Q. Public who wants to have a vote, doesn't have a vote. And even beyond John Q. Public, like you say, in a lot of engineers, a lot of people with lots of dollars don't have any say either. These conservatives are coming out and risking a lot, in movie business, and they always have risked a lot. But my understanding of what LA is like, and has actually been, there's a base core of highly conservative people. And I know when I, growing up as a kid, and we had contacts, and some of my family members were in the movie business and that sort of thing. But everybody that I knew that was in the movie business was highly conservative then. Now, in the New California State Movement, we get a chance to talk to all the people that are kind of like the leftovers. The John Q. working man, the gaffer, the sound guy, the cameraman, those guys, they're all conservatives, and they hate the liberal movie stars, the elites, prima donnas, if you will, because of what they represent. But they are a small minority, these people. But the election system makes them a majority.
If you understand the movie business in its entirety, who financed and sent Metro Goldwyn Mayer and those people to the United States from Europe? The Rothschilds, because they knew that it was going to be a new medium and that we control it. So the people that originally started Hollywood were very exploitive, and P. Diddy and these guys are nothing compared to some of the older movie mogul heads of studios. So this has long been a situation. But like you said, in California, a lot of the actors and actresses were conservative because many of them are just regular people. They don't come out of the European system or whatever. But what you have to understand about the movie studios is they were always put in place to dramatically affect people. But what happened is that people in Hollywood think they're so above us, a lot of them, that they started becoming super condescending because they were given the power and the money. And they thought, but you know what really triggered me to look deeper into it? I was listening to Julia Roberts' response on the backlash. And she said, it's our job to do this. And I started thinking, it's their job? Like, why is it their job? Because they're being paid by the major hedge funds to promote all these ideologies, is what it is. So she literally admitted what they were doing. Did you get that email from me? Did you see the Biden clip where he admits that California looks like a war zone, and that it was really unusual that 3 fires started in the same place? And then Kamala Harris chirps in and goes, oh yeah, that global warming. Have you seen that clip?
No, but we're going to play it right now as soon as I get it
set up. People right now.
Yeah, as soon as I get it set up here. This ought to be pretty good. I actually have seen this, yes, but the audience hasn't seen it.
It might make it a little more believable if people are on the fence about the things that we've been saying.
Yeah, well, I think when you get done talking and we're talking together on the show, people aren't on the fence anymore.
Well, people already send me emails about that white paper.
Oh, yeah. Okay, here we go. This is
so I responded to a few people there.
This is Biden getting the federal update on fires. Here we go.
It looked to me as I traveled when I was out with you in California, what it reminded me of more of a war scene where you had certain targets that were bombarded, where artillery was just blew them up. With no rhyme or reason. In other words, you'd have this fire going crazy and burning everything down, and 3 houses being fine. Nothing's happening. Or neighborhoods that were still green. And next to a place that, for example, we're just looking at a Secret Service house that was out there. All the vehicles are melted. No, yet the house next door still has green shrubbery on it. And, the house is fine. There's only, I think, 4 or 5 houses in that 200, it's in the Pasadena area. But my generic point is, it's almost like it's a battle scene.
But Mr. President, we saw that in South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, and Florida with hurricanes.
Yeah.
This is also the nature of, to your point, this changing climate, these extreme weather conditions.
There she is to wipe the slate clean, right?
And of course, her husband benefited dramatically from the lithium underneath supposed hurricanes there.
That's right.
He owned the lithium deposit. He sold it 2 months before the disaster. And now all those people, and what's under there, the lithium that they need to build out all of their new energy
tools.
And so, and again, those people have been left because they're poor and they were going blue. They were blue and they were going red. So they were punished. So it was a twofold situation. And
well, it's almost like is that map that you showed, or that we saw earlier, of where the fog was in California. That seemed to be all the counties that flipped red. Flipped red, and those are all new California state counties. The only place that we're working to turn things around in any county, and the California GOP can't stay squat because they were totally inactive in this election. Nobody from the California GOP was working to do anything. All those are new California state counties with active organizations. They all flipped red, and they all got poisoned. That's really when I looked at that map, I thought, yeah, well, there it is. And I'll get that map up here in a second. But
well, I think it's threefold. They want us all, Agenda 2030, to be driven into the cities. The insurance companies are pulling out of California. So even if people want to rebuild, they're not going to be able to get a loan from the bank to rebuild, right? Because there's no insurance to insure it. So I think there's a lot of culmination of a lot of different things. We're just not have the beginning of the kinetic war, but we've got the political collapse of most standing political parties in most Western countries. We have the instability of the financial system, the collapse of the banking system. We've even got this BRICS, where a lot of people were using it as the alternative to the US dollar. But all of the countries in BRICS, I think besides one of them's currency has dropped dramatically. So we're watching the collapse of the current banking system, and the rising inflation is going to continue. Inflation is not going to be stopped, even if Trump is in office. It may come down a little bit because we're going to start using our own fuel and things like that. But that's going to take a while to actually hit into the system. And right. Because we've got so many other culminating things, I believe inflation is going to continue. We have a growing national debt. Our politicians can't stop printing money. And who are we borrowing it from? The Chinese.
Yeah. So, who don't have any money themselves.
Well, but they're using this money to gain influence. I was in London at a financial conference before COVID. And I'd noticed this in several major cities. The Chinese have these high rises that are completely built out. They're completely lit up, but no one's in them. And right. It started me on this road. What's going on with China? Why do they have? Because the Communist Chinese party is losing and the people are turning against them. I mean, they've beaten managers to death on the floor. They've murdered entire families. They've just had riots all over China where the people are throwing rocks and beating the police with sticks. So the high level Chinese are going to be leaving and letting the rest of the normal people die of all kinds of diseases because all their water is poisoned. They've stolen all their resources. They've taken all their timber and they don't have any food because they've destroyed all their farmland with these weather modification things, because they too want everybody out of the country and into the city because that's the way they're going to keep control. Right. So they sacrifice their own food supply to get people to move into the city. And then again, they're completely lying about the population. So there is no opportunity. The entire Western world, which is linked to the Chinese economy because we've moved so much of our stuff and it is moving out of China. But the entire world's economy, there is no growth story, right? The Western world has the same problem as China. In countries in Europe and Japan, I think in Japan, there were no babies born last week, right? So this is a massive thing that's occurring. And regardless of what our politicians are doing in this current system, there's no way for the average people to recover from what they've got coming from us. And that's what their plan is. And then the growing national debt, which is a security risk, and the military industrial complex that's been pushing for a world war. And you earlier were talking about how the cartels had control of Mexico. Where are they getting all the fentanyl? Where are they getting all these plans and all the technology and stuff for the infiltration of the United States? They're getting it from China and other hostile nations. And they're probably even getting some of it from our own deep state. So what a lot of people don't understand is that eugenics is alive and well. They've killed hundreds of millions of people since they implemented these eugenics programs. And what's going on in the West and in Japan and in China is a direct result of these same groups of bankers
right.
who want to reduce the population because the more of us there are, they can't control us. They also, eugenicists like Bill Gates' father and Margaret Sanger, they openly discuss wiping the Black and the Asian race off the planet. So these are open directives, and that's what we're seeing. The Chinese people, I pray for them because they have had done to them what they plan on doing to the rest of the world. That was just the test run. And so over this last few years, we've seen about 17.5 million illegal people come into the country. And one of the reasons they're allowing that is because of our deficit of people being born. And the only reason the people in the United States have a deficit, unlike the other European countries, like in France, it was so expensive to have a baby. And I lived in France in my 20s, and they had signs everywhere, there's more to life than sex. Have a baby, the government will pay for you. So this has been an issue. But the reason we have an issue in the United States is directly related to the eugenics programs. They aborted 17.5 million Black people.
Well, this is what I say all the time. That when I talk about, there was somebody who was talking about at one point in time during one of my shows about, the race issue and about blacks and this, that, and the other. It was all about New York City. And I finally had to kind of say, well, look at, I don't look at the kids being aborted as black, white, or pink or whatever. I said, I look at them as being Americans being aborted.
Yes.
I mean, I'm a population guy. I understand the genetics behind it and population and all that stuff. I said, this is having a detrimental effect on this nation. And just because they're black doesn't mean anything. These are Americans being aborted.
No, I understand that they're American. We're just talking, there was many more Americans of other races aborted. We're just talking about this specific number that's actually the target of these groups of people. So now, because they hate Black people and they hate Chinese people too. I don't really understand why. I've tried to delve into that, but they believe that they're in superior races, and they want their bloodline. I believe one of the things that they were looking for in the COVID, and especially why they centered the testing in Black areas, is they're looking for a certain blood type or person.
Right.
And I can read their coding and their numbers, the way they talk to each other in numbers. They do it via news magazines. They do it on their own. After COVID, all the stars like Ellen DeGeneres, Oprah Winfrey, all of these people who have been under suspicion were constantly messaging from their shows. And I didn't have anything to do for 2 weeks, so I just decoded everything they were saying. And they are definitely under fire. And there's an underlying situation where I was reading their messages back together. One of the things that was saying that Michelle and Barack Obama had been arrested. That's what they kept messaging back and forth to each other. And also that they were looking for a Black Mexican in Chicago. And they were constantly talking about it in the communications between each other. So I believe there's some link to they're looking for a bloodline or a blood somebody, right? Like if we know we go to Ethiopia, a lot of people under the confusion that, Jesus was a European. Jesus wasn't European. The tribes of Israel were not white. They were dark. And so they're looking for somebody, I believe, in all of according to their own messaging to each other. They're looking for that.
It's interesting. I used to, teach genetics back in the day. And then when I opened up my first charter school, it was in a building that had been previously owned by Affymetrix. Now, what was the job of Affymetrix? And it's kind of interesting because one of the things that caught my eye as I leased it was they had DNA over some of the lab facilities that were there, and they were complete lab facilities it was a brand new building. I'll show you the motivation of this. This was a brand new building, and the company had been given an offer to move everything lock, stock, and barrel out to Indonesia, which they did. And this was 180,000 square foot building. And I made an offer on it that they couldn't refuse, the offer was $15 million over 3 years, and a lease option for $15 million. And, they didn't hesitate at all to sign the document. The guy who was running the deal for me, a dear friend, he's a Navy SEAL. He came back within just minutes of making the presentation. He said they took it. So really, but so we get in there and they've got all these drawings and everything on the walls. It was almost like a classroom of genes, splitting genes and identifying. I could read what they were doing, And I thought to myself, this is my kind of place. I can build a charter school out of this sort of place. 180,000 square feet this is prime stuff, brand new building. They had started to occupy the building when they made the deal to move. So some of the stuff they had still in the building when we leased it, and they were going to set it all up and everything. So that, oh no, we're not doing that. We're taking all this now to Indonesia. Now, what did they do? It was very interesting because it had all these lab rooms and everything. But what did they do? Their job was to preserve the human genome on wafers and on discs. Now, what better way to preserve it and to study, which is what they were doing, studying the genes and for various hybrid vigor things, things that would stand out, which is what you're talking about there. So they're plotting this. I mean, I know this. I just revealed it. This is what they're doing. They're plotting out who's got the better genes and who doesn't.
Well, do you understand? Do you know what an anagram is?
Oh, yeah.
It's an anagram for Dan, DNA.
Right.
The tribe of Dan in the Bible says that's where the Antichrist will rise. And that Dan is associated with the serpent that laid across the road. It's all symbology, right? So the DNA, our DNA was modified at some point by the serpent seed. That's in every story in the world, right? That's our Adam and Eve story. Right. So our DNA has been corrupted, hence the tribe of Dan. That's my theory. I've looked into it and come to that conclusion.
Amazing how this is working out in such a scale that we're seeing.
Well, last night I spent 3 hours with the Black woman who owns an NGO. She's a podcaster. She focuses more on health. But I spent 3 hours with her, and she works for underprivileged children. And she just said to me, she can't believe how much I know about Black history. And she's never met a white girl with green eyes. That's a really, really in-depth conversation.
White girl with green eyes. There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, she'd never had a conversation like that with somebody, of another race, and how I knew the history and how the slaves were taken from the land of Judah on the Ivory Coast, and their history was removed, so they didn't really know who they were. And then I think you and I discussed on one show, the Rastafarians knew that they were one of the lost tribes. And yep. Kamala Harris had to hide her true grandparents because her grandmother led and supported Bustamante in Jamaica, whose goal it was to extinguish and genocide the Rastafarians because they knew where they'd been taken from, and they wanted to have a separate Jewish society like they'd had for thousands of years. A lot of people don't understand that the Ethiopians and other people worshipped Yahweh 1,500 years before Christ was born. So this goes way, way back. And a lot of our, if you really do look at the Ethiopian Bible, you can have a much better understanding because they have all of the texts that were removed by the Catholic Church. So the Bible makes a lot more sense if you read the Ethiopian or even the Slavic version.
Would Martin Luther have access to that?
I don't know about Martin Luther because, it was a limited time. The only reason I know about it is because of the internet. I have never been to Ethiopia. I do have one Ethiopian customer, and I always ask him a lot of strange questions.
I bet.
But I only have one Ethiopian contact, so I got to drill him.
Well, it was interesting in that vein because one of the first places that Mussolini bombed was Ethiopia.
Well, right. And there's certain things, the British have been down in there. Of course, they have lots of different reserves. But there is the city of London are people who openly claim to be Jewish, but they don't believe in God. And they're not related to the tribe of Shem. They're Caucasians from the Caucasus Mountains, and they're Turks. So this is how all this stuff gets really confusing. They literally, what the Khazarians are known for is stealing other people's identity and assuming their identities. So this is one of the reasons that the Tsar of Russia forcibly converted them in the 7th and 8th century, where they had to go to the Muslim faith or the Jewish faith, otherwise they would have been executed. So they're leading members, all the things we see like child trafficking, organ harvesting, the transgender, like I think I've mentioned before, Ghislaine Maxwell's mother was a man, and both her father and her mother, quote, ran the radio rooms for the Nazis in Czechoslovakia. And they were supposed to be, if not imprisoned for life, but executed for their crimes. Instead, the British government extracted them and brought them to England, put them at the highest levels of government. And Ghislaine Maxwell's mother, I'm pretty sure, was one of those Nazis that continued to live as a woman in England. So right now I see a massive acquisition by the Chinese CCP of gold. They're buying gold all over the place. They're just not recording all the gold that they're doing. And I believe what's going to happen is they'll let that country burn, and and all of the Chinese communists will be extracted by these nations that they've been having the deep state. And they'll be in the city of London in that high rise that I was mentioning. And they'll be in all the real estate and stuff that's been bought all over the Western world. And they will extract them. And then these people, like the former Nazis, 60 years ago, will be put into high levels of our government situation, and they will finally collapse the United States and turn it into what they want, the New World Order. So I don't believe that all the communist Chinese are leaving. Xi Jinping is starting to ban people from leaving and calling all foreign nationals home, and banning them from taking their money out of the state. So
I saw some waves of foreign nationals leaving several months ago. I don't see that wave anymore.
Well, because you don't think that the foreign nationals are these guys were high CCP. The reason they have contacts in the United States that are going to help them is because they've probably been paying them off.
Sure. But what I'm saying, there was an initial wave of everybody leaving, and that has all stopped. And I think it's because of what you're talking about here, is that some of these guys are realizing, I'm not going back. And the hell with the family, because, as you know, they hold the family over their heads. If they don't come back, they kill the family. That sort of thing.
But the problem with the younger generation is nobody's having children and all their parents are dead. So right. Yes, you use that. But, China has the largest aging population in the world. But again, I'm not sure those numbers are real, because when you understand I learned this when I first did my first communist, I was in business with the Russian State Department and UBDK, which is the Foreign Housing Authority. So basically, I was in business with the KGB for about 4 years. And what I learned looking at the budgets for the different operations they had is they overbill. They say they have 600 people, but we could only count 200. And so you've got places like Nigeria and other countries that have a centralized government, and they say they have this many people, so they get that much money. Or in Nigeria, they get that percentage of the oil revenues. So they're stealing it blind. Communism is about stealing, okay?
That's
because
right.
Their system doesn't work. So it's about sucking everything dry, and then the elite goes somewhere else and they do the same thing. What a lot of people don't understand, like people were watching China right now, and they're being really aggressive in their international pushes to get power in other countries. Where do you think they got this idea? They got it from the Americans, right? Okay, so after after the Civil War, the United States had a big boom. And when we started losing our economic boom, because it kind of had boomed out, and if you understand the true cause of the Civil War was to put us into the paper money. It was caused by the European powers who owned the banking system to pit us against each other, to destroy, because the French and the British were fighting a lot, to destroy all the French infrastructure that had built in the southern states. And so after we had a boom, and then we had some of the worst depressions in history after that. And of course, this all led us in to 1913, 50, 60 years later, we're getting the Federal Reserve System where our politicians illegally sell us out. So if you understand, these things have happened a lot of times in history. That's why I'm pointing it out right now. So what did America do when it was a massive depression and been taken over by the same European banking powers that now control China? They started going around the world, investing in different places and offering their militaries for their exports to protect them when they manufactured things in their country and exported
So we basically have been in the protection racket.
Yes. And one of the reasons we're having trouble in the Middle East is over the last few years, we pulled a lot of our protection out of those waters. And now there's all kinds of infighting.
Trouble. Yeah, there's all kinds of trouble. And, you know, Trump was the one who pulled everybody out, because one of the things that was happening is, shockingly, we were becoming energy independent under his tutelage.
Right.
And we just didn't need all the mess that was going on down there. And I can remember Chris Street making statements, because, you know, he teaches the communist Chinese and some Islamic countries. Everyone, consult with him. But he was telling them, he said, you know, America's pulling out and you guys need to protect yourself from the Houthis and everybody else. So good luck. And that's what Trump did. And again, what happened was it backslid into the chaos that we've all enjoyed into what we have now. But a lot of that was promulgated by Obama before Trump came on board. Absolutely.
Well, right. And you know, they can blame it, but the problem is the world does have other options, and those countries have heavily relied on that. Who gave Saudi Arabia all the power they have?
We did.
Prescott Bush did.
Right.
Prescott Bush, George Bush Sr.'s father. And what do they have in Saudi Arabia today? One of the most oppressive regimes in the world. Anywhere, and North Korea has been controlled by the CIA. Iran has been controlled by the CIA. The dark factions of this banking system have already collapsed a lot of the world. We're the last one. We're standing between them and the rest of the world. That's really what's going on right now. And people have to stand up and start understanding this right-left paradigm is a bunch of crock, because pretty much anyone who's been in business in DC or been in politics in California must be aware of this. I'm not the only one that can read a military white paper. Right?
No, you were born at night.
Regular lady who has 2 jobs, and my mother lives with me, and I have a farm, but I seem to be able to come up with this. Podcast once a week. So,
yeah.
And I do a lot of writing. When I learn all this stuff, I just sit down and I just start writing, and I'm just like all the stuff that's going through my head. And that's how I come up with all this stuff, because that'll trigger this memory and that'll trigger this, because I've been in current events. I traveled 11 time zones in Russia as a citizen ambassador with the mining industry. I was a mining executive for a few years. And so I've been to a lot of countries. And when you're in the mining industry, you're actually out in the rural areas looking at projects, talking to the normal people, and not getting everything filtered through CNN or Fox.
Right.
Their own government propaganda. Because, Fox caters, both news agencies get their reporting, their information from the AP.
Yeah.
None of those reporters are really out doing investigative journalism anymore, and there may be a few here and there.
Well, one of the things that I was delighted with was this recent go around starting in November of news and information coming out about New California and New Illinois and everything. Fabulous reporters, by the way. It's not just that they were reporting good things. They were reporting the truth. And the other thing, too, these guys were digging for the facts and wanted answers, which I didn't feel threatened. Yeah, I'll tell you whatever you need to know. But it's so different from what you get from the networks. Or some of the print media, where they just slay you.
Did I explain to you how they're getting their money from, and that they've been bankrupt for years? The newspaper industry's been on the verge of collapse.
Right.
Look at a newspaper; it's got like 3 pages. I mean, the LA Times used to be super thick. Now it just looks like a grocery store flyer. So
that's right.
What you understand is that these people are part of the military industrial complex, and they're part of the government budget. So disinformation and misinformation basically means the government didn't say it. So it's not.
That's right.
Okay.
You missed it, yeah, or you dissed it. Yeah, that's exactly right. So the upcoming situation going on around the inauguration, your thoughts on that?
I think they've got to be careful. I'm pretty sure that the Secret Service still works for Joe Biden. So I'm not sure that there's going to be, I think they're not prepared. They've been run inefficiently. They've proven that a bunch of times. But I think that a lot of reason Kamala Harris lost is because anybody who actually thought about it realized that the government was involved trying to kill Trump.
Right.
There's just no getting around it.
You can't escape that. You just can't escape that everybody stood down from this was a stand down. The security people just didn't show up, or they just stood down and ignored things.
That's right. And how I know it's getting through, I have a close friend that's about 15 years younger than me. She's a French Canadian. And, she has completely different political views than I do. And
I will imagine.
She was worried about the fire. And so she sent me a text. I said, we're being burnt out, this and that, blah, blah, blah. And she sent back and she's like, you're right. So that's how much when I tried to talk to her about 3 years ago, and I'm talking someone who never even pays attention to any of this kind of, she's young and beautiful. She's an international sales rep. She's traveling around the world all the time. But the reality is that she understands what's going on. So if we're getting to foreign nationals trying to explain what's going on to California, and you can see this because all over the world, it's not only the celebrities and public figures that are crashing, it's the politicians.
Right.
The top 10 governments have either been voted out or collapsed. And as your friend was saying, they're trying to get Taiwan and South Korea. And to me, they always knew. I don't know if you've ever looked at the negotiation that Henry Kissinger did on behalf of the United States government when we opened up. We agreed that Taiwan belonged to China. We also agreed that South Korea did. And instead of, I believe it was always set in motion 50 years ago to create this, because China didn't own Taiwan. Why did our government say they did? And the whole thing that's going in South Korea, like you were talking about earlier, the Chinese have heavily infiltrated China. I mean, what normal person who's not being paid off says, let's join North Korea so so we can all starve? I mean,
yeah, it's all about control and power and everything. Well, listen, we got to run for time, Simone, and I want to really thank you very much for putting in the extra time for us and straightening out so much. You just bring so much to the discussion about, and it's so timely with all these. John, I asked him, I said, we are at war, and he said, yes. I've asked you, we are at war, and you said, yes.
Yes.
And I want to get this to the public's mind that we are at war. It's going to require really some incredible things and events to happen. We hope that we know that Donald Trump is going to change that. We just have to get past the election, or the inauguration. That's not it. No. Once we get past it, that's when the real work starts.
Yes.
And that's what people, I don't think, understand yet. We have to put a stop to the warfare that's out there right now. And the only way we're going to do that is to continue to identify it.
The only plan for the Western nations, people are turning against them. So what do when the population gets too big? They start a war so they can send all the young people off. They create a massive depression. They create a wartime economy. And then they implement what they supposedly sent the people to war to fight.
Yeah, right. Anyway, yeah.
Hypocrisy is deep.
Great job. Thank you very much for being with us. We'll talk real soon, and get some rest. I mean, the map that you showed, that I'm going to put this up here real quick again, but the map that you showed there clearly shows the Central Valley. We've all been gassed.
Well, I
we've all
think
been
if you
gassed.
wanted to, you could actually watch that video I did with you last time, and you can see it in front of us. So that was about 10 days ago.
Right,
I haven't
right.
for like 3 or 4 days. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, listen, Simone,
right.
Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for listeners.
Simone Anderson with us here on Agenda 21 Radio. Remember to visit our website, a21r.com. We'll be right back. You're listening to Agenda 21 Radio.
New California State is going back to Washington, D.C. to meet with Congress to become the 51st state. Not since 1959 has the United States allowed into the Union a new state. New California was founded in 2017 and declared independence from California on January 15, 2018. Working for the last 6 years to build a new state that the United States can be proud of, New California will stand strong with the other 50 states in the Union. It takes financial resources to send delegate representatives to Washington, and we are asking for your financial help to send our delegates to make a strong case for the New California state. We are all tired of the tyrannical ways of communist California, and it is time to allow a strong constitutional state to reestablish the rule of law. California has failed its 40 million people, and it's irreparably broken legislatively, judiciously, and financially. The only remedy left is to exercise our rights given to us by Article 4, Sections 3 and 4 of the U.S. Constitution. By splitting the state, New California will return the U.S. Constitution back to being the supreme law of the land for both states. Just as our founding fathers intended, New California will restore our God-given liberties by giving the power back to the people that the progressive have been stripping from us for decades. Elections will be controlled again by the people, for the people, with one-day voting, paper ballots, hand counting, voter ID, and no machines. The Constitution was written for a time like this. Now is the time to reread it, not change it. We are committed to New California, and failure is not an option. It's the only way to save our state and our homes. We do this for the children, mine and yours. Please donate to New California today at newcaliforniastate.com. newcaliforniastate.com. That's newcaliforniastate.com, so we can keep the light of liberty forever bright.
And welcome back to Agenda 21 Radio. Some closing thoughts. We have the inauguration coming up. We got a lot of things going on. We have another day with us that's going to be happening. I would say some pretty interesting things happening in the future. But another day in the week. What's more drama, I'm sure, about what's happening in Southern California. We're going to get the best news and information to you. The phones, by the way, in the last hour have been ringing off the hook, and I can see with the area codes, and they're all from Southern California. So I'm about to get I think another dump of information coming from some of our listeners, and I really want to thank everybody in the chat room. I know we had a little bit of a sound issue with John Mills. That was on his end, not mine. And we'll try and clean those things up. We try and get those things worked out and before, but sometimes it just doesn't work out like we want. Anyway, thumbs up. It says here 160 watching, 36 likes. Okay. Anyway, thank you, Chris, very much for that. A lot of people tracking what we're doing here. A lot of people are watching on all the channels because we have about. If you go to Red State Talk Radio and you listen, you'll look at the constellation of channels that we broadcast out of. That's another thing. It's just another ball game altogether. We're on Roku. We're on all the majors, and so that's why I say it's. Some people say, how many people are listening to your radio show? And we've had estimates of 500,000 people listen on a daily basis. So, and more than that sometimes, depending upon what it is. But it went all in. The audience was a little bigger before because we had some other little channeling things going on, and then we kind of changed it around a little bit. But all in, we're about 500,000 a day, which is a lot. Sometimes it's 1 million, and that's also a lot. So the channels add up. In other words, there's just a diverse stretch across the nation and even in the world. Okay. Anyway, thanks for listening to Agenda 21 Radio. Remember, stay strong, America. Stay strong. We are exceptional Americans.
They're sending out an SOS to the last vestiges of freedom, democracy, and the American way of life. Paul Preston with Agenda 21.
This is AENN, American Exceptionalism News Network.